have never told the story to anyone, not my best friend, not my therapist, not even the woman I almost married. Maybe because some stories don't stay in the past. They wait. They settle under your skin, and years later, they still know exactly where to hurt. It was close to midnight when it happened. Rain battered the hotel windows hard enough to sound like handfuls of gravel against the glass. The lobby lights were too bright. The carpet was damp near the revolving door. We had just finished a 12-hour investor trip. 2 flights, 3 meetings, 1 delayed connection, and the kind of exhaustion that makes every word feel expensive. I was tired in the ordinary way. Olivia was tired in the dangerous way. Still standing, still composed, still carrying tomorrow before tonight had even finished with her. The hotel clerk barely glanced up from his screen. Only 1 room left. He said it casually, like it meant nothing, but I felt the air change. I looked at Olivia, waiting for hesitation, for annoyance, for some sign that she understood how impossible that sentence really was. She didn't hesitate. She slid her card onto the counter and said, "That's fine." The clerk pushed 1 key card across the desk. Just 1. I picked it up and turned it over once in my hand. I could feel Olivia beside me, silent, steady, unreadable. She wasn't looking at the clerk anymore. She was looking at me, waiting. For anyone else, it would have been a practical decision. 2 exhausted adults, 1 late-night mistake, a hotel problem, nothing more. But nothing around Olivia was ever just practical. She was the kind of woman people talked about even when she left the room. Not because she invited attention, but because she carried the kind of presence that made other people nervous about what they looked like standing next to her. And I had spent 3 years standing next to her. Close enough to know how she took her coffee when earnings were bad. Close enough to recognize the difference between her public silence and her private exhaustion. Close enough to know when her jaw tightened because she was angry, and when it tightened because she was hurt and would rather die than let anyone see it. Too close, probably. Closer than was safe. I set the key card back on the counter. "We can't stay here," I said. The clerk blinked, confused. Olivia turned fully toward me. For the first time that night, she really looked at me. Not like her assistant, not like a problem solver. Like a man who had just done something she hadn't expected, and maybe something she hadn't trusted herself to ask for. There was no anger in her face, no embarrassment. Only that stillness she got when something mattered more than she wanted it to. And in that moment, standing in a wet hotel lobby under bad lighting, with rain hammering the glass behind us, I realized this wasn't only about appearances. It was about proximity. 1 room would have been a mistake in public, but in private, it would have been something far worse. Because I didn't trust the night. And I didn't trust myself not to remember every second of it. Let me tell you something about me. I'm the kind of person people forget until they need something fixed. Mid-30s, executive assistant. Efficient enough to be indispensable, ordinary enough to be overlooked. My job was never to shine. My job was to make sure nothing else broke. I knew which flights would be canceled before the airline admitted it. I knew when a board meeting was going wrong before the board did. I knew how to rearrange a day, a trip, a crisis, a disaster, all without anyone noticing the original problem had ever existed. Invisible, reliable, useful. For a long time, I thought that was enough. Then the woman I almost married looked at me one night across our kitchen table and said, very gently, "You're dependable. I just don't feel chosen." At the time, I thought she meant romance, grand gestures, flowers, some version of love that was louder than what I knew how to offer. I understand now that she meant presence. To be chosen is not the same thing as being helped, and I had spent my life being helpful, not seen, not wanted, not risked, just useful. Then there was Olivia, early 40s, CEO, brilliant in the kind of way that made mediocre men instinctively defensive. She never raised her voice. She never needed to. Rooms adjusted themselves around her. Conversation sharpened when she entered. People sat straighter, chose their words more carefully. But power had cost her. A few years earlier, she'd gone through a divorce that turned into sport for people who confuse gossip with truth. Strangers and colleagues and people who had never once asked her a sincere question built entire versions of her life from fragments and timing and whatever made the ugliest story sound believable. She survived it, but survival leaves marks. After that, she became even more careful. Not colder, just guarded in a way that looked effortless from the outside and exhausting up close. She knew exactly how fragile reputation was, especially for a woman in a position people were already eager to challenge. And somewhere along the way, without either of us ever saying it aloud, an understanding formed between us. I protected what happened. She protected what it looked like. That was the deal. So when I refused that hotel room, I wasn't only protecting her name. I was protecting the thin, dangerous line we had both been pretending not to see. 6 blocks later, we found another hotel. Smaller, cleaner than expected. No one important would stay there by choice, which made it perfect. 2 rooms, same floor, 2 key cards. In the back of the cab, the city blurred past in wet streaks of light. Olivia sat beside me, angled toward the window, one hand resting loosely in her lap. She didn't complain. She didn't thank me. She didn't do anything that would make the moment easier. After a while, she said, "You understand this will cost something tomorrow." I kept my eyes forward. Yes. A beat passed. Then I added, "Still less than the alternative." That made her turn. I could feel it before I saw it, that shift in attention, the quiet weight of her looking at me in the dark. When I finally met her eyes, there was something there I had no business noticing. Not softness, not surrender. Something more dangerous. Awareness. As if for one brief second, we were no longer discussing a logistics decision. As if we both knew what had really been avoided. She looked away first. My room smelled like bleach and old coffee. I sat on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, going over the next morning's schedule, trying to force my thoughts back into columns and times and transport details. Then my phone lit up. "Kiara from HR, call me now." Before I could move, another message came in. Someone at the first hotel took a photo. Front desk. Harold has it. Harold was a board member with the gentle manners of someone who understood exactly how much damage could be done without ever sounding emotional. He collected leverage the way other men collected watches. A photo was all he needed. Not proof, just shape, just timing, just enough to let other people finish the story themselves. I crossed the hall and knocked. Olivia opened the door almost immediately, as if she'd been standing near it. She was wearing hotel lounge pants and a dark sweater, her hair still damp at the temples from a rushed shower. Without the armor of the office around her, she looked younger for exactly 1 second, then more tired than I had ever seen her. Her eyes dropped to my phone, then lifted to my face. I told her. The photo. Harold. The likely meeting. She listened without interrupting. Then she leaned against the doorframe and closed her eyes for half a breath. When she opened them again, her expression had changed. Not shattered, not panicked, just stripped down to something unbearably human. "It doesn't matter what happened," she said quietly. "It matters what they prefer to believe happened." I don't know what overcame me then. Maybe it was the hour. Maybe it was the rain. Maybe it was the sight of her standing there in the soft light. No audience, no witnesses, no boardroom polish. Just a woman who knew exactly how quickly the world could turn on her. I wanted to say something reckless. I wanted to tell her that if they had seen the way I looked at her, the photo would have been the least of our problems. Instead, I said the only thing I could afford. "I won't let them do this to you." Her gaze lifted and held mine, and for a second, neither of us moved. There are moments in life that feel almost romantic, not because anything happens, but because everything almost does. That was one of them. The conference room the next morning smelled like overbrewed coffee and polished restraint. Legal was there, HR was there, Harold was there, already seated, already composed. Olivia walked in first. I followed. Harold didn't really look at her. He looked at me. "Nobody is accusing anyone of anything," he said. Then, after a pause sharpened for effect, "Yet." Olivia reached for her chair, and something in me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, more like a wire pulled too tight for too long. Before I could rethink it, I said, "Before we start, I'd like my statement entered first." The room shifted. I handed over the folder I had prepared at dawn. Separate room confirmations, time-stamped receipts, records from the second hotel. Every detail in order. Precise, clean, unarguable. Harold glanced through the pages and gave me that soft, patient expression men like him wear when they want to remind you who actually has power. "No one is accusing you of anything, Nate. Then let's keep it that way." Silence. Then Olivia turned toward me. I have replayed that look in my mind more times than I should admit, because it wasn't gratitude, it was recognition, as if she had spent so long being surrounded by people who managed risk that she no longer expected anyone to accept it for her. "He made the correct call," she said. "And if anyone here has a problem with that decision, they can address it directly to me." There are sentences that protect you, and there are sentences that reveal something. That one did both. The meeting went on, but none of it mattered after that. Harold pushed language about optics. Legal asked about timing. HR tried to keep the tone procedural, but the truth had already entered the room. Not the truth they were discussing, the other truth, that she had stood beside me, publicly, deliberately, without flinching. When the meeting ended, she walked out first. I followed her into the corridor, where morning light cut across the windows in pale strips. She stopped without turning around. Then she said, "They're reassigning you from my calendar for 30 days. Something in my chest dropped. "Temporary," she added. "Clean optics." I nodded because I didn't trust myself to do anything else. 30 days is a very long time when you've built your life around someone else's rhythm. My days became quieter after that. Different executive, different meetings, different emergencies. The same bright offices, the same stale coffee, the same polite conversations that disappeared the second you stopped being useful. I drove home each night to my apartment in Oakland and heated soup I barely tasted, left the television on for background noise, slept badly, woke early, reached for my phone too often. I told myself it was habit. It wasn't. It was absence. 3 weeks in, my phone buzzed with her name. Not a scheduling request, not a file, just Olivia. "Do you still keep aspirin in your left drawer?" I stared at the message for a full second before replying. "Yes. Would you bring it up?" Her office was dim when I arrived, the late day light turning the windows silver. She was sitting behind her desk with one hand against her temple, reading glasses folded beside an open folder. And on the desk, near her elbow, was the legal pad from New York. My handwriting. She had kept it. I set the aspirin down in front of her. She reached for it, and our fingers brushed. It lasted less than a second. Still, after 3 weeks of deliberate distance, it felt almost intimate. Not because of the touch itself, because neither of us pretended not to feel it. She took the tablets dry, then glanced at the legal pad. "I never gave this back." Her voice was quiet, then quieter. "The last few weeks have been easier for everyone else." She looked out at the glass, at her own reflection more than the skyline. "Not for me." I think there are some moments when the room becomes too honest to survive on professionalism alone. This was one of them. She told me the board considered the reassignment a success. Distance had restored appearances. 30 days had given everyone a convenient lie they could live with. But bringing me back? That would confirm the suspicion they had spent a month pretending to reject. "They think distance fixes perception," she said. "I think it rewards cowardice." Then she looked at me, not through me, not past me, at me. "If I ask for you back, they'll say I proved their point. If I don't, then I let them decide something that isn't theirs." What she meant was bigger than work, and we both knew it. I had spent most of my life avoiding any choice that could expose what I wanted. It was easier to be necessary than vulnerable. Easier to serve than to step forward and risk being refused. But I was tired. Tired of hiding inside competence. Tired of calling fear professionalism. Tired of pretending the tension between us was only a byproduct of long hours and proximity. I looked at her and understood, with terrifying clarity, that this was the moment when a person either remains safe or becomes real. "Don't bring me back quietly," I said. Her expression shifted. I kept going. "Don't do it in a way that lets them turn this into something shameful. If you want me back, do it where no one gets to pretend." The room went still. She held my gaze for a long second, and there was something in that silence more intimate than a confession, because it carried choice and risk. and the possibility that we were finally speaking about one thing while meaning another. Then she nodded once. I felt it like an answer. The announcement came the following Monday, company-wide, formal, brief. Nate Torres joins the executive strategy team effective immediately. His judgment during a recent logistical situation demonstrated the analytical rigor this company values. That was all. No mention of the hotel. No mention of the photo. No mention of what had been defended or by whom. But anyone with half a brain could read between those lines. A new travel policy followed within days. Separate room guarantees, escalation procedures, language for refusal when accommodations posed reputational risk. Our names were nowhere in it. And somehow, that made it feel even more personal. The board stayed quiet. Men like Harold rarely object when they've already lost. That evening, I remained in my new office later than necessary. It was small, but it was mine. There was a window. The city outside moved from gray to steel to violet as the light thinned across the bay. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for an emergency. I was just there, visible in a life I had almost missed by trying too hard to be harmless. When I left my office, I noticed the light still on in hers. I stopped at the glass. She looked up, set her glasses aside. And in that pause, in the quiet after weeks of distance and rumor and restraint, there was no audience left to perform for. "You don't hide well anymore," she said. I leaned one shoulder against the frame. I stopped trying. A small smile touched her mouth. Not bright, not easy, but real. The kind of smile that appears when two people have finally stopped insulting each other with denial. No kiss followed. No declaration. Nothing cinematic happened, unless you understand that sometimes the most cinematic thing in the world is restraint giving way to truth. It was just two people, exhausted and changed, standing in the fading light of an office that had cost them both more than anyone would ever know. And for the first time since I met her, I no longer felt like the man arranging her life from the edges of it. I felt chosen, not claimed, not possessed, not promised, just seen. And somehow, that was more intimate than anything else could have been.